Give me that. Let me see what we're covering today. Okay, Orc. Right, okay. I can envisage a intro where I go and put on all my cosplay gear, like armour and a giant axe and all that. What was that? Oh, Orc with a K. Right, okay. So is it based on the TV series Mork and Mindy? Game based on Mork's home planet? No, not that either. Why is it called Orc then? Hello everybody, welcome to the re-review, the series where I get to replay and reassess games from my favourite gaming era. I'm Brian, also known as UK Gen Zoidberg, and I like nothing more than revisiting old games and seeing whether or not my opinions of them have changed. In this series, I've been going through all of the games that I reviewed during my time working on magazines such as GamesX and Amiga Action. There have been many big name titles, as well as some obscure ones that you've probably never even heard of. Then there are games like the subject of today's video, ones that were seemingly great at the time, and yet everybody seems to have still forgotten about them. So join me as I replay Orc from Psygnosis, which was released in 1991 and developed by WJS Design. There was always something that felt a little bit different about games that were published by Psygnosis. For starters, the boxes that their games came in were a different size to the norm, and they usually had a spectacular piece of artwork on the front of it from Roger Dean, or at least inspired by him. It's probably the closest that any publisher ever got to having their own house style that was instantly recognisable. The games themselves also stuck to a familiar graphical style, no matter which development team was behind them. You could play Shadow the Beast, Leander and Agony alongside each other and instantly know which company made them just from looking at them. Whereas developers like Reflections, Traveller's Tales and DMA Design have all gone on to become household names with gamers, thanks to big blockbuster titles like Driver, Lego Star Wars and something called Grand Theft Auto, the developers of Orc, WJS Design, were not quite so lucky. Wayne Smithson began developing games in the mid-1980s under the name Smithson Computing, and his first game was a platform game called Gordon Bennett, released for the Dragon 32. A game which was described by Dragon User magazine as a well-designed Manic Miner clone with good presentation. Following a couple more similarly well-received titles, he produced the side-scrolling shooter Skyrider for the Atari ST. This led to working with Psygnosis, producing Baal and the Atari ST version of DMA's Blood Money in 1988. Better was still to come though, in the shape of 1990's Anarchy, which was the first game to carry the name WJS Design. Anarchy had been developed with the working title It Can't Be Done, which was a reference to the fact that many believed that the Atari ST was incapable of smooth horizontal scrolling. Smithson set out to prove them wrong, and in many people's eyes he succeeded. While less of a technical showcase on the Amiga, the gameplay still shone through, and it's still a great game to play today. Easily one of the best Defender variants that you can play on the Amiga, in my opinion. The team's next game was Orc, which is the one that we're here to look at today. It was an action platformer with all the expected gloss and polish, including some smooth parallax scrolling. It was released into the busy Christmas period in 1991, where it failed to make a dent on the charts. It was, however, sharing shelf space with the likes of Lotus 2, Megalomania, Jimmy White's Whirlwind Snooker and Alien Breed, so perhaps that's not surprising. The only other original Amiga game produced by WJS Design was 1993's Beast Lord, which was published by Grand Slam. Instead, they built themselves a reputation as a reliable converter of games from other systems. Amiga versions of Creatures from Thalamus and Fields of Glory from Microprose were both well received, as was the Atari ST version of Lemmings 2 The Tribes. Smithson has gone on to have a great career in the games industry. He would go on to work at Sumo Digital in Sheffield, where he was part of the coding team responsible for Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, and then in 2011 he joined Double 11 Limited. Double 11 have been responsible for a number of games in the Pixel Junk series, as well as the console versions of Rust. He remains at the company today as the Chief Development Director. Now let's go and find out what I thought about Orc first time around in my original review. My review appeared in issue 30 of GamesX from November 1991. Game of the Week in this issue was The Adventures of Willy Beamish on the PC from Sierra, and we also featured an exclusive preview of Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, which was also the cover game. Orc was the subject of a 2-page review where I was full of praise for the game's graphics, and there was plenty of room to show them off in screenshots. I loved how detailed both the sprites and scenery were, and was very impressed by the smooth parallax scrolling. I also really liked the title music and sampled sound effects. It must have been the job of the PR representative from Psygnosis to make sure that we pointed out how similar the game was to the Killing Game show, but also to point out that the game was not connected to it in any way. Not only was it the first thing that I mentioned in my summary of the game, but I also noticed that it was mentioned in many other reviews in other magazines as well. Anybody who has played the Psygnosis Classic will undoubtedly enjoy this one, and anyone who likes shoot-em-ups will be equally at home too. I scored it the full 5 X's out of 5, earning it an X-rated award. Presentation scored a whopping 19 out of 20, with gameplay getting 18 out of 20 and last ability 17 out of 20 respectively. Here's how my score compares to the ones that appeared in other magazines that same month. Now let's boot the game up again and see if I still feel the same way. It's time for the playtest. It's almost like watching a public domain demo, just looking at the title screen with some of the fancy graphical effects that are being shown off here. Nice parallax scrolling, some good rotational effects on the graphics. Sets things up quite nicely for what's to come. So I'm playing this on the A500 Mini, and what I've done is I've programmed in the controls so that I press a button to jump rather than push up on the joystick. And I've also programmed in a button for the spacebar, which will come apparent as to why I've done that. Like I said earlier in this video, there's something instantly recognisable about a game from Psygnosis with the number of colours used in the background. In this opening level of the game, the colours that are used for the enemies and the backgrounds blend a little bit too much compared to some of the later levels. But the central sprite is very nicely drawn and animated. Let's give them kudos for that. You do have limited ammo, but there is thankfully no time limit to the levels, so you can take as long as you want to do things. So what I had to, in order to select an item at the bottom of the screen, you have to press the spacebar to bring up the inventory and then press fire to select it. It's a fairly simple system, but obviously it requires you to be sat over the keyboard, which thankfully, now that I'm playing it on the mini console, is not the case. So some of the collision detection is a bit off, as you can see here. So you would think I would be able to shoot this enemy here, but I apparently can't shoot through that rock there. As you can see, the bullets are clashing on it, even though I can walk through it. So it's a little bit odd, but it's something that I can live with. This opening level is very short, and it just serves as an introduction as to what's to come. So that's literally all I have to do. Take the key to the gate, get the money, and pay the gatekeeper, and that's it. So second level, things open out a little bit more. What you can do with these computer terminals is you can actually analyze the items in your inventory. So object analysis, I can then analyze that sphere that I've picked up. When placed in the proper receptacle, it will disengage laser doorways. But as you can see, this second level does a bit of a better job when it comes to the color scheme. Everything stands out a little bit better here. The game does only give you one life, so the fact that I died there means that I have to continue. But as you can see, the continue point is pretty much exactly where you died, so that's quite nice. Right, that receptacle there, I think, is where I have to put the diamond that I can find somewhere else on this level. Right, so let's try and find that diamond then, shall we? What these little terminals here do is that they allow you to fly. As you can see in the top right hand corner, it tells you how much fuel you have. You can just land straight on one of the other terminals, and that stops you using your thrusters. There is the diamond. Right, okay. It's important to pick up the fuel canisters when you see them and make sure that you don't run out, because I have noticed that you can get completely stuck. If I'd gone down there and ran out of fuel while I was down there, I would not be able to get back up, and I would just have to restart the game completely. No restart level option, just restart the game. So probably good that the game has a save game option, which if you have a disc that you can put in to save, it was probably advisable to do so when you were playing it back in 1991. Even with the controls programmed in on the Mini, it's the jumping is still a little bit awkward. So as you can imagine, playing it with a joystick would have been even worse. You'd have thought when you've got a scanner that you'd be able to see a lot more than you actually can, because that doesn't seem to show a great deal. It's not much there at all. Ooh, what have I picked up there? Picked up a flame. Ah, I can pass through those. Okay. That's it. I'm guessing that the flame that I picked up a minute ago is what I can use to burn the rope over here. Okay. There we go. Right, let's have a look in the scanner. Now that I've entered an area where I've not been before, let's see what's around here. So I can definitely go down to the right, and up to the left there is a takeoff point. Let's see what's down to the right first, shall we? Yes, that lets me go to level 3. So, which way do I go? Water. There's no real idea what this character actually is that I'm playing as. It looks like some kind of robot chicken, but he might not actually be a robot. No! Yeah, judging the jumps is far too complicated on this. And there we go, I'm on game over again. Right, so let's get to the summary and see what I think of that game today. There are definitely aspects of Orc that are still worthy of praise today. While there are moments, particularly on the first level, where both the enemies and backgrounds blend together a little bit too well, on the whole I found it to be a very good looking game. I also really like the music by Tim Bartlett, particularly on the game over screen, although I did find the sound effects to be a little bit over the top. Lowering the volume of the guns and explosions, or perhaps choosing something that was a little more in keeping with the sci-fi setting, would have been better in my opinion. Movement of the character is a little bit stodgy at times, particularly when jumping, and it makes it quite difficult to avoid taking damage a little bit too often. It didn't stop me from enjoying it though, and the level design is good with minimal backtracking required. However, the fact that you are able to completely run out of fuel and the only way to fix it is to restart the game completely is something that should have been ironed out in playtesting. Apart from the fiddly jumping, the other aspect of the game that I had a little bit of a problem with was the collision detection. There was one too many occasions where my bullets seemed to have no effect whatsoever on the enemies, or they just didn't pass through parts of the scenery when it looked like they should be able to. With plenty of other action platform games on the Amiga, this is how I would rank Orc against them in the Retro Game Super League. It's another category with a large number of games in it, and you can see me explain my choices in next week's full video. Giving it such a high score first time around was definitely an overreaction. There's certainly fun to be had here despite the flaws, but I couldn't go above 6 out of 10 today. Thank you for watching this episode of the re-review. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you like what we do, then please consider subscribing to the channel to show your support. We have a number of great playlists available here on the channel, so if you want to check out the Retro Game Super Leagues, or maybe just catch up on an episode of the re-review that you've missed, the links should be on screen right now. If Orc was a game that you played back in the 90s, I'd love to hear your opinion of it and see whether or not you agree with mine. All opinions expressed in this video are entirely mine and not those of the UK Gaming Network team. There's going to be another episode of the re-review coming up in 2 weeks' time, where I'm going to be taking a look at Special Forces from Microprose. Hopefully you'll come back for that one. Until next time, happy retro gaming, bye for now.